Hello, believers. Welcome to the show. Believe Me is a podcast where we speak to creative minds about what they like, how they think, and how cult 90s TV has shaped them. I'm in the car. This car is a proper dad wagon. It's an estate. What is it? Vauxhall. Floors covered in a selection of mud and dog hair and orange peel. I mean, it stinks, and I had it valeted the other day, which cost about 35 quid. So I won't be doing that again recently. I'm going for sort of dive bar vibe in here, minus the whiskey. My guest today is very familiar with being in a car. He's one of the first people I knew who owned a car. He always seemed very grown up to me. It's the comedian and director Stuart Laws. You will know Stuart from his many stand-up shows, both at the Edinburgh Fringe and touring the UK. He's been a tour support for James Acaster. You may have seen any of the myriad of brilliantly funny videos he's done online. He runs his own production company called Turtle Cannon Media. He's very busy. We talk about the differences between directing and performing comedy, a bit about neurodiversity, a lot about vasectomies, and yes, also we chat about X Files S1 Ep6 entitled Shadows. As always, if you enjoy the show, do drop us a line at believemepod@gmail.com or get in touch on the social medias. Thanks for your messages. Please do like and subscribe and all that. Anyway, without further ado, here's Stuart.
Your hair is looking gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's, I go in and the barber is, it never recognises me, even though we're going to the same one. Every single time. I tell him the same story every single time. And I did used to say, I went to like Elvis, sort of buzz cut, Elvis in the army. But, I'm getting a bit old now, so I can't really pull that off anymore. But you're same age as me, aren't you?
39.
Yes. Are you feeling, how are you feeling about reaching 40?
Yeah, it definitely plays on the mind a little bit, doesn't it? Can't not think about it a bit.
Yeah, this is part of the reason for doing this. What do you feel about it? Do you feel as though you've achieved a lot in your life already? Because I look down the idea of another 40 years of this and I just think, oh my God, is it just it's the same again, but...
Yeah, we've got to do this again. Yeah, another 18 years of not having sex.
Speak for yourself, lads.
Where would you put that? Would you put that now, or would you put that at the end of your life?
What, being a top shagger?
Yeah, to be having to be chased again.
Oh, end of the life, because it's sort of, it all dries up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does actually. Unless you keep dunking it in water. Apparently, that's what you're supposed to do. I don't know.
Has the vasectomy affected any of that, or is it just all systems go?
Yeah, it's all systems go.
Yeah.
I first considered having a vasectomy when I was like early 20s.
Really?
And yeah, I remember sort of mentioning it to a girlfriend at the time, and it just being sort of like a lighthearted sort of thing. Neither of us wanted kids. So it was like a lighthearted, but it was obviously like culturally, you're like, you're not going to do that, are you? Because you're in your early 20s. That's mad.
Mm.
And then, you have a couple of relationships where kids is an issue or is a discussion point or a sticking point. And you go, oh, why don't I just do that thing now that I'm 35? I think when I had it, when I had it, where I'm like, I'm not changing my mind now, am I? Because I've said goodbye to 2 good relationships.
Right.
And it's been 15 years of me thinking I should have a vasectomy. That's enough thinking time.
Is it just like a load off then, for want of a better word? Is it like
Yeah, it's a load off my chest.
yeah. Is it just like, well, that's that. I can put that to bed and, I don't have to think about that anymore, or you've compartmentalized that in your brain now?
Yeah, I think, and without it wanting to like, I don't want to create any sort of like big links between this and other sort of like affirming surgeries or stuff like that. There is like an element where I'm like, had it done, and actually it's only really happened maybe in the last couple of years where I've just gone, oh great, I'm who I want to be now, and I don't ever have to worry about becoming something I don't want to be.
Sure.
And it is a genuinely pretty like mentally like I was like, oh, that's a huge sort of like weight load off my mind. Yeah, I'd say combined with it's been interesting sort of couple of years, because I've done I've been diagnosed with autism as well. That was very recent, but it's been the last couple of years that I've been doing sort of research into it and sort of investigating that. And to have like those two things where I'm like mentally like, that's two things that I'm like, oh, number one, I'm never going to be a parent, which is something that has been very important to me. And two, I'm not just a weird guy. There's like a medical reason for why my brain does what it does. And you can like go back over like years and years of stuff and be like, oh, there's that thing that I did that time when at the time I just felt like weird and isolated and didn't know what to do about that. And I go, that's why I did that. And it's sort of, for your mindset, your brain, you're like, oh, great, I can sort of feel a lot more relaxed about who I am as a person now. And it's sort of mad that it takes until your late 30s to sort of hit that.
Yeah, sure. How did it sort of present itself? And was it kind of a catalogue of things that kind of you started making a list of and then going, actually, I don't think about things in the same way?
Yeah, I'd always like had a bit in me that was like, I would do the occasional like online tests and things like that. It'd always come in as like, likely to be autistic, but I was like, well, these are just online tests and these are like fun, like, I was treating them like BuzzFeed, like which cast member of Frozen are you?
Snowman, probably. Funny guy, isn't he?
Yeah. Fucking legend. But these, I'd say again, there would like little bits of how people would react to me, or like little ways that some people would make comments on things. But again, never really considered it until a few friends got diagnosed over the last few years. And some of their first instincts was like, Stuart, you should get tested as well. And I was always like, haha, that's funny. It's like, you remember that bit in Ellen when Laura Dern. I'm trying to adhere to what your podcast is here, which is 90s TV. Where Laura Dern is a lesbian, is chatting to Ellen, and there's like a suggestion. The joke is like, is Laura Dern trying to recruit Ellen to the club? And it's like, what do you get, like a free toaster or something like that?
Right.
Is the gag. And then in the post-credits sequence or the credit sequence, it's like Laura Dern sort of like getting the toaster. So it's like a lovely little punchline to this lovely sort of reveal of a mainstream queer person, I guess, in a sitcom for the first time. That's what I felt like it was like a bunch of people being like, haha, I'm neurodiverse, and I think this weirdo here should get tested as well.
Right, okay.
Because we want more people to chat to about it, that sort of thing.
I see. So is that's do you feel you're at that point now, and is it more about
Oh, it's definitely changed how I've conduct my life now, and it's like a massive relief on so many things. And I had a bunch of people beforehand, including people who might be neurodiverse themselves, be like, well, why do you want this now? Like, as the implication being like, you're 39, you've gotten through this long without the diagnosis, why do you want it now? And it's like, well, why would you not? If you've been if we can invoke Plato's cave,
when in Rome, yeah.
If you've been looking at the shadows on the wall all the time, and then you're told you can go out the cave, why would you not want to have that extra information? And since then, it means I can like I've now like said to people, oh, I'm not going to come. I'm not going to come out on this date. I just need to have a night in, sort of thing, which I would never have done before, because I would have just pushed through and then created like a situation where I was like, I've been in plenty of situations where I've been stood outside like a pub or a venue or that, like genuinely like fighting myself in my brain to like drag myself into that place.
Yeah.
And now there's like a permission to just be like, no, you can have some time off on that. Or like if I'm stimming, I'm not having to hide it so much, or, and, being with people who are aware of what stimming is and who are like, able to be like, oh, to either ignore it if that's the necessary thing, or to like be sensitive around that sort of thing is just very useful.
That's a new bit of terminology to me. Yeah, I'd be interested to know what that. I can imagine what it is, but here you talk about your experience of that.
So that's like a repetitive like motion or like tapping or scratching or movement that you do as like a sort of, if there's stress or anxiety, it's done to sort of like as a control sort of thing.
So when you kind of see those signs, you can think to yourself, you become aware of it yourself, do you, a bit more?
Yeah, and you just go, okay, I need to sort of either, give myself sort of some time by myself, or I need to sort of like, we need to change the subject, we need to move on to something else, or we need to like, we need to do something, or to just sit in that moment for a little bit and just sort of allow the situation to sort of pass, to calm down, sort of thing.
Is comedy conducive to your life now and these discoveries you've made recently? Does being a stand-up comedian help or hinder that?
It's interesting. I would say I've now sort of, and I think it happens with a bunch of people who do stand up, and obviously there is a higher proportion of people in creative industry or stand up, maybe even specifically, who are neurodiverse. So it sometimes feels like everyone is, until you mention it to people who aren't in those sort of industries, and they're like, "What?
Right?
What are you talking about?" But to look at a bunch of my routines, including stuff that I could never get working, and realizing in hindsight that they are the expressions of an autistic brain trying to relate, trying to like convey a thing, or trying to understand the world. And it's not all of it, but it's like quite an interesting bit to now look at and be like, so in my current show, there are a few routines, and there is a line in there which is, I don't explicitly say that I'm autistic in it, but I got the diagnosis 10 days into Edinburgh.
Right.
And I'd sort of readjusted a couple of the routines to sort of make sort of more explicit, like if you know,
okay,
you'd be like, oh, that is a routine about an autistic person trying to understand the world, or failing to like act correctly within the world. So like the routine where I tell someone on their wedding day that my first emission post vasectomy contained blood is a true story, and is not something that anyone should say to someone on their wedding day. But because I was like, oh, I don't worry about it, and she pushed to say, no, tell me. I took that to be like, okay, well, I'll tell you everything. Whereas I'm thinking a more neurotypical person would have been like, oh, I would have like obfuscated it a bit more, would have just done a
sure, yeah.
Whereas I was like, no, you've just asked for it all, so I will give you all of that information. And it was Pierre Novelli that told me that that's what had happened there, and I was like, oh yeah.
Right.
He was like, you're following the rules. She said, tell me. And you said no. And she said, no, tell me. So you went, right, well, I'll tell you then. Whereas I guess social rules say that you shouldn't, you find a way around doing that on someone's wedding day.
Have you had people who've seen the show and they totally get that and have come up and gone, yeah, I know, I'm with you on that. And, I like you say, it's not like a club, but it's like, if you know, you know.
Yeah. And I had it from people before I was diagnosed. I was in the process of it, but they said, they've come up afterwards and said, are you neurodiverse? And I was like, not officially.
Right.
And they were like, oh, because it's a really, like, I'm neurodiverse and it really spoke to me and it feels like a neurodiverse show. And I was like, that is, I mean, I guess, again, another tick in the diagnosis box.
Yeah. Wow.
It was, I think the lines that I added in for that particular routine about it was like, I say, after I say the horrendous thing and she's staring at me, I go, and because I'm quite smart and I pick up on social cues, I realized I shouldn't have said everything that I had just said. And that being like a little sort of nod to the supposed inability or increased difficulty for autistic people to pick up on those sort of social cues.
How incredible to go into, Edinburgh, and then for that to happen, and then for you to have this sort of, this whole sort of reevaluation of what you do as I'm going to say it, as an artist. Why not? We're doing a podcast.
Yes.
Yeah, and then almost to find this totally new audience there who, would probably come into the shows for years and got it, and then so it's just absolutely incredible, fascinating. I mean, you said that when I spoke to you last time that you were thinking that this was going to be your last stand-up show. Do you still feel that?
Well, annoyingly, this is what keeps happening, right? Is I feel that, and then I'm like, but if I get certain things or it feels like I'm progressing in some way, partly because run a production company that is very busy, and I do stand up, which is very busy. So it's like 2 full-time jobs.
Yeah.
At the same time, that I was like, you can't keep doing this forever. Like, you are almost 40 now, and you have a bunch of friends in this industry who are mid-20s. There comes a point where you've got to accept that you're like not relevant anymore.
I think you get away with it though, Stuart, if you don't mind me saying. I think you not get away with it, but I think you're you're young at heart, mind, and facially. Certainly pass for a 25-year-old, but
yeah, and I keep trying to, but they won't let me in there like young Gen Z comedy nights.
Yeah, I mean, is it so there's a sort of active shift, is there, to sort of, I guess the original question was about doing those hour shows, Edinburgh shows, but I mean, will you still perform will you still gig basically, and will there be a shift to just doing less of that and more directing?
I still haven't made that decision at the moment. The tour for this show will go in next spring,
right? And
it's starting to be booked in, and I feel like it's a show that I don't want to sort of waste. I feel like it's my best show, and I want to like maximize the value of it by like getting it filmed for for a really nice special, to try and take it on tour to places that I haven't been before, including like India and America and Australia maybe. And my feeling is that like we're still in that time where you're like still throwing ideas out there and seeing what is new material. But it sort of did energize me, and I found it, even though this show took 2 years probably to write explicitly, but also it's the show I've been trying to write for maybe 5 years.
Yeah.
And just I'd keep on like writing something, playing around with it, and then backing away from it and ending up doing the same sort of like silly, whimsical, sort of lighthearted show. That's not to say that this show isn't silly and whimsical, but it's also deals with a fairly heavy topic.
Yeah, well, I mean, what struck me is I remember you doing that bit of material about finding the porn video, and it was almost, I don't know how, it must have been about 3 years ago, and it was kind of like you say, it was almost quite whimsical in a way, and I think we were talking about how do we talk about this in the current climate, and neither of us being particularly alpha laddish guys. And then seeing the show in Edinburgh and how that's like a major part of it in a really beautiful, it's quite beautifully constructed and kind of quite heartfelt now. So that was nice seeing that come into fruition.
That is interesting, yeah, because I guess, what was that, in 2021 in Edinburgh, those work in progress-y sort of shows? And yeah, that was literally me throwing some quite very early on serious ideas of me being like, and this is again approaching 40, being like, I want to tackle some bigger subjects now, and I feel like a good enough stand-up to do it. But those work in progress shows were absolutely like me coasting on an ability to be on stage whilst then saying stuff that wasn't good enough yet.
I see.
And sort of trusting I will find it at some point. And I think as the show came together, and a huge, thanks to Steve Dunn, who directed the show, who pushed on all of the different areas of like, how are you getting this across? How are you making it land with people? How are you making it taking people by the hand so that when you're talking about a porn DVD and it being a metaphor for grief, how are you making that an acceptable thing and a thing that people find funny? Because the ultimate thing is it's got to be funny. I think this is the show where I've had the longest no laugh section, which I think it ranged from between 45 to 70 seconds.
Right.
And that's the longest I've ever gone before of like, obviously I've gone longer without laughs before purely because the audience hates me, but an intended laugh, an absence of an intended laugh.
How about like doing what Steve does then?
I directed Ian Smith, who got nominated for Newcomer, and Sakisa, who had a great run, and Rhiannon Shaw, who had a great debut year as well. So it's definitely something I like doing. It's just I'm trying to work out how much it sort of is like more from an enjoyment point of view than a job point of view at this point. Like, I think it's a tough area to like charge too much money in because it becomes it's such an expensive process of putting on a show.
Sure, yeah.
That to push it too much, I'm like, I think maybe it is a good way of me working with comics that I like to like build a relationship rather than a big money maker.
Yeah.
I get to like, like someone like Harriet Kemsley, who I directed in 2015. I just directed her special recording, which has just come out. And it's like things like that where you're like, oh, these are people that I think are really funny. And I think I can help make them funnier.
How does that work in the venue? How does that work in the room where in terms of directing someone on the night?
It's sort of when I started the production company, me and my business partner Al, very nice guy.
I do. Well, yeah.
We did a few weddings, and literally was like, well, that pays some bills. And then we were like, we did a few of them. We were like, we should never ever do weddings ever again. They're horrible. They're one take. Like it's like the most important day of this person's life. And also they're like, don't get in the way with the camera because you're going to ruin the magic of all of this for me. Anyway, now a huge part of our turnover is filming comedians' most important days of their lives, where you only get one take at it, and if you stop it in the middle, it sort of ruins the illusion of all of it. I love it, and it's different scales of like what you can do. Some people, like Harriet's, we had 2 shots at it, so you can and it's a relatively small room, but like you can be in the break and just have chats about how the first one went. I think the main thing in those on the night is being like someone who's there, who's making them feel relaxed, because a huge part of it is they know their shows inside out. They know exactly how to be funny by this point. By the point you're making a special, the show, what works, what doesn't work. It's then feeling free and loose enough to go out there and do your best performance of it. And as someone who has filmed his own one, I found that tough. I was very much, I can watch my special and watch the first 10 minutes. I'm in my own head and I can see that. And other people who've watched it are like, no, I don't think so. And I'm like, yeah, I can just see it.
Right.
And it's like trying to get people out of that and to be able to just enjoy it, because the rest of it is done. If the budget's there and you've got, Video Village where you're looking at all the angles and you're on comms talking to all the camera ops, you've got your script written out, you've worked on it with the act, you've planned out like on this one we're going to do like a little camera move here. That's all great, but the main thing is it sounds good and the performer is having a good time.
Yeah, totally. At what point did the idea of going into stand-up occur to you then? Because I know you and Al have been, you started the production company a long time ago, and that's being a filmmaker has always been close to your heart and something you wanted to do. But at what point out of that did you go, I'd like to do comedy in my own right as well?
A friend was at university and they did it, Matt Sandstorm.
Right.
And he was like, we'd always done stuff as kids together where we'd like hosted talent shows and stupid stuff like that, always mucking about. And he was like, you should give that a go. And it was literally an open mic in Slough near where we were. I think we were filming some sort of like educational video or something. And there was this open mic, and Al said to me, why don't you just do that? Get yourself signed up. Did it. And annoyingly, you know, it's really, you get one laugh in those situations and you're like, oh my God, I need to get that again.
Yes, right. That's it. You're hooked then for life.
Yeah. Now, it's always impressive when people get out of it. It's sort of like when you see someone who is like, who stops doing comedy and you think to yourself, bloody hell, you fucking did it. You did it. I can't believe you got out.
Let's chat about the X Files, I think.
Yeah, the X Files.
Because I was sort of watching it as a like, how badly is this aged and has it aged? And I think this episode, which we're going to talk about, which is season 1, episode 6, Shadows, is actually one of the ones which has aged the worst of the ones I've seen. But it's certainly, you know, it still works. And I'm kind of continually bowled over by how quickly it moves as a TV show. I was interested in reading about this one where this particular episode to be an episode where Mulder and Scully help people. There weren't enough episodes of the 5 that preceded where they go and actually help someone. So it's like, well, let's try and write something about that. Almost like they're approaching like Knight Rider or one of those Glenn A. Larson shows where it's like Mulder and Scully move from place to place, helping people, and it's a bit spooky. So, I mean, what did you think? Were you always weren't you? You were always a massive fan of it.
Yeah. I remember it being so exciting to be able to watch episodes when I was a teenager, and you know, like a friend of mine would get the VHSs, and so it would be really cool to like try and watch as much as you can. But obviously, back in those days, I didn't have the concept of it being like what network TV in America was, and how it was like 24 episodes of a TV show, and like even like, you know, when we were younger, you'd watch things like Murder, She Wrote or Magnum PI, or, you know, all of these sort of things which are like you know, episodic, like, you know, serials. But the X-Files having this sort of like, they'd have the mystery of the week and then they'd have this overarching storyline, was something that sort of like was such like an amazing thing to me at the time, of like, oh my God, so you can have this like show where all of this stuff that I'm used to seeing is happening, but there's other stuff going on in the background. There's another storyline, and you can pay attention, like, oh, it's the cigarette smoking man, or it's like, oh, it's the, you know, the black ooze, or all of these things that are like starting to like tie in, that you're like, this is great. Because I think that's what I love about TV and about film, is when the world feels so lived in, and so like, you're like, wow, this is so vibrant and rich.
When did you first sort of become aware of it? Do you remember?
I think it has to be like 13, 14, surely, which would be what, like 97, 98 sort of time, which means it would have been like 3 or 4 series in by that point. Is that fair?
Sure. Yeah. Got it.
And yeah, because I think basically my parents were quite like restrictive on what we were allowed to watch. And I think maybe the X-Files slipped past a little bit because it just didn't seem like it had terrifying things in it. And I definitely remember like being like 16 or 15 or 16 and having like a sleepover, or maybe it was younger, maybe it was 12, 13, but like having a sleepover with some friends and us sneaking the Moby track that they use in the episode where the doll keeps coming alive.
Right. And
we'd snuck that onto queued it up on my CD player. And then our friend, who was also obsessed with it, he got all the VHS. He was from a very rich family, so he could get all the VHSs. He had all the Star Trek VHS box sets and everything. So it was like, he was the guy that you'd go over to if you want to watch an episode.
Big dog.
But he was terrified of it. And we waited till he went to sleep and then brought the music on with a speaker next to his ear. It's bullying.
He's scarred for life now.
Yeah, poor guy.
They ended up doing what they did with Seinfeld, which is like playing it at like 11:30 at night. So if you didn't have a VHS player, you weren't staying up. You weren't staying up to watch that.
Yeah. So I just seen the X-Files movie came out in 98.
Yeah.
And I remember being a big thing to go and see. So I must have been into it in like 96. So it must have been like 12 years old that I was like getting into it properly.
Yes. Yeah. What did you think watching this one back then? And what do you think you'll watch the rest of it again?
You know, it absolutely ties into everything. Like I love conspiracies. I love all of that sort of thing. I love that sort of like there's extra things going on that you can't comprehend, and like having these sense of mysteries. I don't believe in any of them.
Yeah.
But what I like about like this, well, I mean, obviously this is this episode in particular sets up, it already has a few of the tropes that become sort of classic X-Files things, which is like Scully running into the room just after the paranormal thing has definitely happened.
Yes, that I should set this up. So this is an episode called Shadows, and it's essentially about a poltergeist, and they based this this episode on a film called The Entity, which I'm sure many people have seen. And in The Entity, Barbara Hershey is haunted by a dead husband, and it gets pretty full on. That film, Mulder runs in, sees someone hanging in midair, being choked to death by a ghost, and Scully comes in and is like, "Oh, what's going on?" Totally misses the entire thing, and then it happens again, sort of. Towards the end of the episode, where she's locked out of the room and manages to break in, and all hell's broken loose in there. There's like Mulder cradling the woman Lauren, and there's paper everywhere, and this floppy disk they're trying to get hold of, which has got some information on, has been discovered, and she's still playing it like, "Oh, I don't believe in any of this," which is totally out there. So that seems to be something that you're watching it going, how are they going to keep this up for another 11 series where Scully is still totally disbelieving of everything that's going on,
Yeah. I think that does become like a running joke of like how Scully keeps on not seeing. And it's like, how can you still be a skeptic at this point? Because like by the rules of skepticism, you've had enough evidence now to change your mind. And I remember even when I was a kid, I was like, still like, I was annoyed with some of the episodes that there'd be like, I can't remember, there was one that was like to do with a monster or something like that. And in like a lake in America somewhere. And it was obviously their like Loch Ness version. And the episode finished and there was just like a ripple in the water. And you're like, oh, and then they actually just show it. And you're just like, I'd love it to have become more like unclear about what it is. Like,
right.
I'd love to have had that scene where everything's going crazy in that room, but us to be with Scully and to not see it, and then to it not to be like they've shown us that it is supernatural.
Yes,
that it is paranormal,
or totally do it the other way, where it's like, oh, ghosts are definitely real now. So from season 1, episode 6, the world just goes, yeah, that's the thing. And then the X-Files plays out where Mulder and Scully are basically just embraced as people discovering age-old like supernatural phenomenon. That's totally a thing now. Thank you, Mulder and Scully, for changing the world. And I did, and there was little bits in it where it's almost like they're trying. From the last episode was where Scully went on a date for the first time. You see her go on a date, and they kind of begin amping up the relationship with the two of them. But there's definitely an odd shot where Mulder's getting the car checked out. The car ends up in an accident. Basically, the ghost takes over the car, and they end up nearly writing this car off. But there's a little shot of Mulder swinging a coat over his shoulder, and then Scully looks at him, and it just lingers a little bit too long, and you think, what are they setting up here? And the other thing that stood out was your favourite, which is the computer enhancement shot. Oh,
yeah, I did enhance it by 10.
Oh, glorious.
Absolutely superb.
Computer expert sat around looking at her picture. One of them says, and she goes, enhance it by 10, and then you have a little bit of trickery, and then gloriously you're able to see the picture in finite detail. It's like, this does not happen in the real world.
I love that there was an option at the bottom. It was like enhance it by 10, and down the bottom was like enhance, and it was like 2, 5, 10, 25, 100, 250, and it was like, oh, what? So it's not that this guy is a computer genius. He just has to press the button. Why can't Mulder
Yeah.
or Scully just do that themselves?
Also, why not just enhance it by 250? And there would be incredible clarity. Oh, don't go let's not overuse it. Just go 10.
And I think just 10 for now. And it was just the perfect amount, because this photo of just her by herself in her flat, enhanced by 10, and there was a man there all of a sudden.
Creepy.
Yeah, it's interesting that a lot of this show is like people being like, "Oh, we're not going to tell you. Oh, this is above your pay grade," and then they just go, "And here's a shot when someone is levitating off of the ground, and it is psychokinetically moving stuff." Oh, right, so it's real. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I feel like. I mean, it's great in a way, but it does flip between trying to seem realistic and totally being completely out there. But I guess that's why people kind of engage with it so much.
I get to be honest, it's a show for believers, right? It's and there's a part of me that like wants it to be more mysterious. I'd love the balance to be like, most of them you don't know what it is. Some of them you go, oh, there is a genuine feeling that this is alien or supernatural. And then some of them is like, and here's the rational explanation, and Mulder was wrong. And Mulder is so blinded by his desire for there to be a supernatural because of his grief and his trauma, that it's affected fully how he perceives things.
Yeah, I mean, and that would make it a radically more interesting show, wouldn't it? Because you would go, well, maybe or you yourself going, well, I'm a believer, but I don't believe in that, or that really is silly. And like you say, totally Mulder's like so open and so sort of damaged as a person that he's just wildly believing anything. And he just wouldn't either, would he? He would be like. He would, I'm sure, draw the line at something somewhere.
Surely, but in this, he says, faking your own death is very difficult, and only one person's ever managed to do it. And I'm just like, well, I'm pretty sure that's not true. And your immediate reaction is, faking your death is very difficult. Is a poltergeist not more difficult?
Yeah, quite. Yeah, is that not more totally out there as a concept to you? Believe Me is written and edited by me, Chris Boyd, with production support from Steve Marshall. The music is by Johnny Boyle, and our logo is by Russ Brown. See you out there next time.